Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome back to our weekly garden hour with MU Extension. We are so glad that you're able to join us. My name is Donna Aufdenberg, and I am down in the southeast part of the state. I hope you're enjoying your summer so far, despite the dry conditions. I know my garden is starting to really produce, even though things are short and stunted. They're still producing, which is I'm surprised. It's pretty nice to have fresh produce. So we're going to go ahead and start this off. Here's the state map. I can get it to switch over. There we go. So anytime during this session or during the month, you can reach out to any number of the horticulture specialists. You might look at the list and find that person that's closest to you. That would be your main person. If it's a vacancy or they're not available, you can really reach out to any of us at any time. So Manoj Chetri from the Northwest region has changed his name to ask your questions here. So if anytime you have questions, please send them to him. If we approach the end of the program, if you have a question, make sure your email address is with it. That way, if we run out of time, we know how to get a hold of you. So we are going to start out with the weather report with Tony. Tony, take it away.
Okay. Well, let's share the screen. What happened with the share? There we go. Let's start off with the current radar because that's interesting, and it's showing that if you live north of Route 36, you probably got some thunderstorms this morning, and you've got round 2 coming through now. It looks like things north of I-70 may get a little bit of sprinkles here soon. You notice these are dying a little bit, and they will probably till about 2 o'clock this afternoon when they'll get restarted. So if you're above I-70, you got a good shot at getting something today. So we hope that it's more than last week, because the models last week really threw me on for a loop. They forecast a lot of rain and almost nothing came. So again, it's hot. Let me get this into slideshow mode. It is hot. It was hot yesterday for all of Missouri, the worst possible kind of hot, no clouds and just dry conditions. Today we're expecting much of the same, especially below I-70. And late July is when we're in the highest temperatures on average. So this is the peak of heat season, if you will. This is the map from yesterday. I wanted to show this to show why we're kind of missing on a lot of these precipitation events. The Gulf of Mexico is kind of cut off, and that gives us our precip, and that a lot of it's falling on Louisiana and Arkansas. And then any Pacific region precip is staying to our north, leaving Missouri out in the cold, even though our dew points are returning to what they should be for the time of year. The pattern has returned a more wavy pattern, as you can see there, and it's progressive. The unfortunate thing is that it's just not a progressive pattern that's favoring us. I'm going to skip the past today because the Midwest Regional Climate Center's site was down. I got a question this morning from the extension folks of why D4 is not showing up yet in Missouri. You can see that D3 has spread it a little bit more over the last week. Get your reports into Seymour, or get your reports into, get pictures of what's going on at your place. Submit them to Seymour, and that's at climate.missouri.edu, and the third link down on the left. If we get those reports in, we might see some D4 showing up. Again, last week was a terrible week. It was warm, it was dry. Well, actually, it wasn't as warm as it could be for the time of year. Again, we're not that far above or below normal temperature-wise, but precipitation-wise, we just keep losing ground. And again, the pattern week 1, mid-June, week 2, late June, and early July is all progressive, all changing, but nothing in our favor. So the forecast for next week, look at this. The models again are showing 4-inch rains, especially for south central Missouri. And, I'm kind of skeptical of it now because the models have just been way over aggressive with the moisture. No new summer outlook yet, but I think we'll get one next week. Let's see, 6 to 10 day outlook. Again, last 3 weeks have been tilting toward above normal precipitation being favored, and it just hasn't come. So I'm a little bit more reticent this week to say that we're going to get a lot of precip, at least widespread. Some of you may see it, and it may be hit and miss. And if you get it, that'll be good for you. End of July, early August, continuing with this near normal to below normal temperatures for this time of year. Again, this is reminiscent of some of the summers of the 70s. I'm not old enough to remember those, but I do have the data from those. And I was living in upstate New York at the time, but this is reminiscent of some of those summers in the 70s that were cool and dry. And above normal precipitation, again, is what they're thinking, but again, it's just not materializing. So submit those CocoRa's reports. If you're on CocoRa's, the zeros are important. Zero precipitation amounts are important. So please add those if you're on CocoRa's. Follow the Missouri Climate Center. And like I said, on our Climate Center website, climate.missouri.edu, you can submit the Seymour reports, and that helps to for declarations of disaster and all that. Soil moisture is still down in the top 8 inches of the soil. You can see a lot of low amounts there, less than 20%, less than 10% soil moisture in the 8 inches above the surface, below the surface. So not a good time. Again, tonight, showers, thunderstorms developing. Some might be severe, but we're going to be in the low to mid to upper 90s, depending on where you are in the state. Western Missouri, hotter than eastern. Tonight, again, some strong thunderstorms are possible statewide, and I think we'll see temperatures down to around 70 statewide, within a few degrees of 70 anyway. Thursday, some scattered showers and thunderstorms, high in the upper 80s north, lower to lower 90s elsewhere, but southwest Missouri may still be in the upper 90s. So if you're down there, you're still going to see some heat. Decreasing chance of showers and thunderstorms Thursday night, mid 60s north to around 70s south. And then Friday, some isolated showers and thunderstorms are possible again, upper 80s to around 90. Friday night, again, some isolated showers and thunderstorms, low in the upper 60s to low 70s. Over the weekend, I think we're going to see some mixed clouds and showers ending on Saturday. In other words, for most of us, it'll be nice. If you're south of I-44, I think you might see some showers and thunderstorms. Then Saturday night, same thing, mainly clear, but if you're below I-44, you might see some showers and thunderstorms. Sunday, I think it'll be clear for most of us, except those south of I-70 and east of 63. You may see the showers and thunderstorms, and mid up to upper 80s. And then Sunday night, same thing, low in the mid 60s to upper 60s. Next Monday and Tuesday, back to what you would expect for this time of year, mid 80s to around 90, with pop-up thunderstorms during the day. and ending at night, and temperatures in the low 60s north to mid to upper 60s elsewhere. So by Monday and Tuesday, back to what we think of as seasonal. Any questions on that?
Okay, well, thank you, Tony. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Schutter out of Kirksville, and she's going to be your moderator today.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have a question on blackberries to get us started with our topics. And the question is, can you share how to care for thornless blackberries? Mine are shooting some very tall canes. And Katie is going to answer that question for us.
All right, hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
There was also another question about thornless blackberry cultivars for Missouri. So I'm going to start with that one and then talk about thornless blackberry care. Thornless blackberry cultivars for Missouri, you notice they all have Native American names. So Apache, Arapaho, Natchez, Navajo, and Ouachita. These are all varieties that were developed out of the University of Arkansas's blackberry breeding program, which is a really neat place to go visit if you ever get the opportunity. They do lots of breeding in blackberries, and these varieties will do fine here in Missouri, and they are the thornless cultivars that are adapted for here. So if you have those, what do we do with them? How do we take care of them? So I believe the question was about they were really leggy and long. So it is actually about pruning. So first off, some terms with blackberries on canes. The canes have a 2-year life cycle. So the first year they come up and they are called primocanes. Prime the first year. And typically that means they are just vegetative growth. Then they overwinter. In the second year, they are called floricanes, flora, flower, and they flower and produce fruit. And after they flower and produce fruit, that cane dies. The crown of the plant is perennial and will send up new primocanes every year. So in pruning, the new primocanes, the vegetative growth, are summer tips. So this helps prevent them from being really leggy and long. So we remove 1 to 2 inches of the cane when they reach 36 to 40 inches tall. And that encourages the lateral branches to grow, which is where we get our fruit production. So then in the winter, we prune again. We remove the spent floricanes. So those are dead canes, basically. They're done with their life cycle. And then on those primocanes that we tipped the previous summer, we're going to cut the laterals back to 12 to 18 inches. So basically shorten those up. And then thin any remaining canes to 6 per square foot. Now, this is the pruning for erect thornless blackberries. There are different types of blackberries and different pruning techniques depending on what you have. So look and make sure you know what variety you have, and then prune accordingly. And we have more information on that in our fruit guides. So if you have questions, please let us know.
Thank you, Katie. Our next question is, what is the best way to water plants when away on vacation? And Debbie is going to answer this one.
Yeah, and this is really timely because a lot of folks, of course, go away for the summer for a short period of time or an extended period of time. So after this is over, I'm going to go away for a couple of days. Water my plants really heavy before I go, and with hopes and anticipation that Tony is right and that we're going to get plenty of rain. So I did not do some of these things that I'm going to talk about here. So planning vacation care for your plants. So we're going to talk about it outside and inside, things that you can do and some suggestions on how you can make sure your plants are still alive when you return back home. So let's look at this. So one of the things that you can do is you can arrange for a neighbor, a plant sitter, so to speak, that you can use. I know that there are a couple of kids, younger kids that are across the street. I ask them to be my plant sitter, and I pay them a couple of bucks per day to water my plants outside for me. And they're just tickled to death, and they learn about plants, and it's educational, and I enjoy doing it. If you're going to have that, make sure you provide a tour to your plant sitter so that they know exactly where the plants are located in the yards, the ones that need a lot of care with water that's actually going to be happening that those plants need. Group plants together close to a water source, if at all possible, to make it easier on some of your plant sitters. Outside, I know I've got some in my back. I have some raised beds on the side. I have plants in the front. Making sure that I've got hoses hooked up on both sides of my house so that it's easy for them to water. Make sure you deep water right before you leave, which is what I'm going to do as soon as it's over right here with my potted plants. The ones in the ground, I already watered really well yesterday. Anything that is indoor as a plant, you want to make sure you put it so that it gets some at least better sunlight than what it might be when you're there every day, just simply because we don't know if there are actually going to be a lot of clouds, what's going to happen. So we want to make sure that they do get some direct sunlight, at least those that do like that sunlight. Place saucers underneath the plants so that if you're deep watering, if the water does come out, at least that saucer or that container underneath can hold that water, and then it can get sucked back up into the pot as you move along over the days. Set out a watering can, which I have one in the backyard. I have one in the front yard so that they know exactly where to find those. Add mulch to heavy potted plants. So I do have some plants that are out there, and adding a little bit of mulch. I don't mulch my pots, but what I'll do is take and put some mulch around those plants, water them deeply, water them heavy, make sure the water comes out the bottom of the plant or the pot, and then put some mulch on the top. That helps to keep that at least a little bit moist. Although our containers do have a tendency to dry out much more frequently than anything that's planted in the ground. For indoors, you could possibly use water spikes. You can get those at any of the different stores. So I have a couple of pictures here of some of my plants indoors. I'll give them a heavy watering so you can see I have some saucers that are underneath. This one's clear, so you really can't see it. And make sure that I've got them watered from the top. If it's not coming out the bottom, I may put some water in the bottom of that saucer just for if I'm going to be gone for a couple of days. You can get water retaining crystals or hydrogel products. You do want to be careful with those just simply because they might burst open, and just be careful as you're using those. Some things you can do if you got some big larger pots, you can get plastic water bottles. Before you open the water bottle up, you might want to just poke a couple of holes in the lid of that water bottle, turn that bottle upside down and kind of prop it. And slowly as you're gone, as you're gone over that time frame, the water will slowly come out of those little holes that are at the top in the lid of that water bottle, which I thought that was a pretty innovative idea. I hadn't thought about that one. Outdoor plants, you want to move your containers to a more shady area. I know my coleus are in the full sun out there. I might move them a little bit closer to the wall on my deck here. Have easy access to a hose and a watering can outside, like I mentioned before. Make sure your garden beds are mulched before you go. A soaker hose on a timer, if you have access to that, would be an excellent thing to do. I do have some soaker hoses that are laid out, so it's just easy for my plant sitter to come hook up my regular hose to my soaker hose, and then they just kind of let that go for a period of time. I ask them to set the time about an hour on their phone. When it dings, then go turn it off, and that's a great way. It makes it easy on that plant sitter. If you've got trees that you're concerned with, especially newly planted trees over the first couple of years of their life cycle, you might want to get a tree bag or a tree ring. I've heard of those as well. Those are good, but you got to remember those only water out to about 1 to 2 feet away from the trunk of that plant. So if you've got a little bit larger tree, you might want to look at those rings. You can set up sprinklers already in your yard if you've got certain areas that you would like your plant sitter to just go and turn the hose on and see that it's getting the amount of water in the area that you want. And then they could, again, set a timer, come back and turn that off for you. So those are just some suggestions that I have, some of the things that I know I'll be doing. And I know I'll definitely use the kids across the street in August when I'm gone to a conference for about 8 days. So good luck with your watering while you're gone, and enjoy your vacation time.
Thank you, Debbie. Great tips there. Our next question is, what is the difference between the different types of corn? And Katie is going to answer this question.
Right, this is one that I get periodically. Corn, what's the difference? Why does it matter? So field corn is a dent corn. It is harvested when it is fully matured, has a hard outer shell and full of starch, and has many, many, many uses. Popcorn is a different kind. It is harvested when it is matured, but has water in the kernel to allow for popping, because as the water heats up, it expands and therefore allows that popcorn kernel to pop. And sweet corn, which is everybody's favorite summer treat, is harvested during the milk stage, so not mature. The kernels are fully formed, but not hard, and it's our favorite for eating. Now, all sweet corn is not the same either. So there are 4 different sweet corn types. We actually have standard sweet corn. So if you're purchasing sweet corn seed in order to grow it, if it has an SU, this is standard. And the sugars in this convert to starch rapidly after picking, so it doesn't last as long. You get that old-fashioned corn flavor. The ears of standard sweet corn retain their quality just for a short period of time after picking, and even in the garden, it changes fast because those sugars convert to starch. So drawbacks are that it doesn't store well because of that conversion to starch. Then we have sugary enhanced, and those could be abbreviated SE or SE plus. They have increased tenderness and sweetness, so that conversion of sugar to starch after picking is slower than your standard. And then we actually have the SE plus varieties that are hybrids between 2 SE parents, so they are considered fully sugary enhanced and are even sweeter. The harvest and storage periods are slightly longer, so they stay sweeter longer. And then we have synergistic, which was a new one to me just a few years ago. And those synergistic years have 75% of the SE kernels and 25% of the SH2, which we'll talk about next. The sweet taste blends the tenderness of SE with the SH2 crispness. So those, we allow those kernels to plump up before picking. And then this is the one that most everybody is familiar with and will purchase, is the super sweets or shrunken 2, which is that SH2. This gene is heightened sweetness, up to 2 times the amount of sugar as standard varieties, and has the slowest conversion of starch after harvest. So that abbreviation SH2 refers to shrunken, which if you've ever planted it, those dried kernels are very small and shriveled up. So the drawback is that yields are generally lower, and those shrunken seeds don't have enough starch sometimes. They germinate poorly, particularly in cold soils. So if I am planting super sweet varieties, I usually do what we call a double plant. So I will go over that row twice to make sure that I get a good stand, and will thin it out after it comes up. The other caveat I will make with the super sweets, I work with one gentleman that is diabetic, and he does have issues with his sugar and does not go for the super sweets because that sugar content is so high. But if you like good sweet corn, those super sweets are really hard to beat.
All right. Thank you, Katie. And now I am going to talk about why did my tree die after it leafed out this spring? Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So a common question that we get during the year is, why did my tree, it may be a young one, it may be an older one, why did it leaf out and then die? So this is a Norway maple that I have in my backyard, and it leafed out this year. It's been leafing out in the 6 years I've lived here. And about 3 weeks ago, the leaves turned brown very quickly and the tree is dead. But if you look closely at the trunk of this tree, you will see that there is an injury. And that is southwest injury. So you may have a tree that leaves out, you may think it looks just fine, and then it just dies. So this tree actually had this injury when we purchased the place. So we purchased our place in 2016. The tree was already there. The injury was already there. And the tree probably was already 7 or 8 years old at that time, which means that it would have gone through the drought of 2012. And here in Northeast Missouri, we had severe drought, and I believe across the entire state, we had severe drought in 2012. And I don't know how much water the tree was given during that year. And then in December of this year, we had the hard freeze, and not all of our woody plants had acclimated to the cold or gone into dormancy. And then we come into the spring and summer of this year, and we are in drought again. And I have to admit that I did not water this tree much at all, okay? So the combination of all those things is really what caused this tree to die 3 weeks ago. So it probably started with, the drought of 2012 and this southwest injury, and then just all these other factors have led to the tree's demise. So we're going to cut this tree down, and I don't know if I will replace it with anything or not. So if you have a tree that looks like that, be sure to look at the trunk and other things going on with the tree, and then think back to the past several years. What has happened during the time the tree's been in your yard that could have led to this? This is a tree that was at the Veterans Memorial in Kirksville. And our master gardeners maintain a bed there. And one time when we were there working at it, this was several years ago, there was a young maple tree that looked like you see here. This is the tree here on the left. So it looked like that. And then we got to looking at the trunk, and we found southwest injury. So when you have these young dying trees, particularly like maples, be sure you look at the trunk and look for cracks. And if it's on the southwest side, then it is dying from southwest injury. But there are other things that young trees can die from. This was a photo sent to me by a client here in Kirksville, and they planted the tree in July. When I got the photo, I asked them, when did you plant the tree? They planted it in July. Well, the tree's going under transplant shock. Okay, so you don't want to be planting trees in July, just bad timing on their part. The photo on the left shows a tree that was planted too shallow. It also, you see the burlap was left on. So, you may hear, well, it's okay to leave the burlap on, it will disintegrate. Well, that's not always the case. I have seen situations where the tree's been planted for 3-4 years, and when we dig it up to see what's wrong or if it dies, the burlap has not decomposed. So we usually say take the burlap off before planting and plant the tree deep enough, not too deep, but not too shallow. The tree on the right, that came out of Marion County, and you can see it has girdled roots. So, you know, I haven't seen the top of the tree, but I would guess that the canopy may be not real dense. It may have dying branches or dead branches. It may not be real, you know, thick. So, you know, you got to take a look at just some of these things going on in the tree. And, you know, if your tree is losing branches, look to see if there are girdled roots. And then this is just a big no-no. We don't use this much mulch, called a mulch volcano, around our trees. So that can lead to death of a tree. These trees came from a neighborhood in the city of Kirksville. So I was driving down the road one day and I noticed this large maple tree. It was turning red, and it was like early to mid-August. And there's actually several in this town that do that. And when I got up close, I noticed that the bottom of the trunk was damaged, and most likely that is weed eater or mower damage, or both. Could be lawnmower and weed eater damage. So when you're mowing around your trees, you want to be very careful not to hit the trunk. Otherwise, you can send your tree into decline and it may eventually die. This shrub is at the Votech School here in Kirksville, and I was walking past this on a way to a football game in late August or early September and noticed this issue, and that's just scorch. So it's, you know, heat coming off that building is causing scorch, and that may appear that it's dying to someone. Here is a scorch on a dogwood. This dogwood is probably getting too much sun. And then this tree is also in Kirksville, and this is oak wilt. And we confirmed this as oak wilt. A Missouri Department of Conservation forester and I went to the tree, to the homeowner's house, and we sampled the tree, pulled a core out of it, sent it to a lab in Jeff City, and it was confirmed as having oak wilt. Okay, so just to sum this up, be sure to look at your tree from top to bottom. Look at, you know, the roots. Are there girdled roots? You know, is there scorch? What conditions have you had? You know, have you had drought? Have you had too much rain? Have you hit it with a lawnmower? So there are many reasons why a tree could be dying. Okay, it's not just one thing. It could be multiple things that could cause a tree to die. So you just kind of got to know what the species is and what your environmental conditions have been like. Okay, so we will move on to our next topic.
Jennifer, before we move on, we have a quick question like, what can you do about oak wilt?
What can you do about oak wilt? Absolutely nothing. So it occurs on oak trees, particularly pin oaks. I see it mostly in pin oaks. And there's another tree. So the photo I just showed you, that was probably from 8 years ago. And up from my office here is another oak tree in a different neighborhood that died in the past year from oak wilt. And it's a pin oak. So we're mainly seeing pin oaks in this area, and there is absolutely nothing you can do. So when you see those symptoms, just know your tree is going to die pretty quickly. They usually die within about 3 to 6 months, and the homeowner has to take it down. So there is nothing you can do, unfortunately. Okay, moving on. Our next question is it still okay to buy plants from the nursery and plant them in the ground, or is it too late? And Donna is going to answer that question.
So thank you, Jennifer. You know, I think Jennifer alluded to this a little bit in her talk. You know, the answer of is it wise to be planting this late in the season? It's really not. To just be blatant. You know, it's to me it's too late. Really, we like to focus early spring or late fall on planting, and I'll talk a little bit about this. Now, when I say that, I am, for all intents and purposes, I'm talking about woodies. When it comes to bedding plants, if you can still find bedding plants, you can actually plant those, especially if you're going into containers. But just remember, the answer to this question actually is determined by taking a look at the type of plant, the time of year, the weather, and the soil moisture. All those things really are variables that can lead to the answer to this question. So yes, bedding plants, yes, definitely you can still plant those. Now, if you're planting those in the ground out outdoors instead of in containers, I would definitely take steps to thoroughly water a couple of days before planting and then plant them, because our ground is so dry pretty much statewide unless you've had some recent rains. And keep in mind, time of year has a lot to do with it. You know, if you want to plant in April, you want to plant in May, that's great. But usually in July and August, we're just in some really tough weather conditions that make it a lot harder to plant. And then weather has a lot to do with it. You know, we're droughty right now. Some years we're good and we have plenty of rain through the season. Other years we're drier. So you have to take in that consideration too. When we're talking about woodies, though, you know, always remember that our focus when we plant a woody species, such as a shrub or a tree, you know, we're really focusing on plant establishment or root establishment before any heat or any ugly conditions may arise. So earlier you can plant them in the season, the better, because you want that root establishment before any chance of drought happens. Now, I know there's a lot of people that will plant in February if they can get the stock. You know, I know there's a lot of people that will plant in November and December. As long as the ground is not frozen, you can plant. And so those are better conditions than waiting until the hot, dry season of the summer. I can't emphasize that enough, that the summer conditions can just be really hard on plants. And so that's why not to plant this time of year, because that soil moisture, that air temper, and that soil exposure can really have, you know, a hard, you know, make it hard on that plant to become established. And so you can end up with transplant shock. When driving through some of these neighborhoods, you see a lot of new things planted and they are not weathering very well at all. You start seeing a lot of the browning of the edges, brown leaves, plants that look wilted. So just keep in mind, spring and fall are always best when it comes to some of these woody species. You know, I always have this question also, can I buy now and plant later? Well, yes, you can, but just keep in mind, if you do that, you know, your plants still are going to be exposed to high heats. They're still going to be exposed to dry conditions, because you're going to have to get out there and water them every day to every other day. So take that in consideration. Do you want to be the one to watering, or do you want to let that nursery be the one to water? And so I always try to say, I neglect plants in the summer. I don't water well. So no, I'm not going to buy them now and plant them later. I'm going to let that nursery take care of them. But think about yourself in your situation. Can you take care of that plant? If you can, and you fear that that plant won't be available when you're ready to plant, then go ahead and buy it. But just be aware that problems can arise in the meantime. If you have any questions about how to plant or planting during the summer, reach out to any of us horticulturists and we will talk you through it. Back to you, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Our next question is, why are my vegetables having premature fruit drop? And Manoj is going to answer that question.
Okay, let me pull up my screen right here. So yeah, this is the time of the year we often see. Okay, let me see. Is my presentation going okay or not?
And Manoj, put it in reading view.
Yeah, let me see. Sorry about that. I think it's good now. Okay, so this is the time of the year where we see some anomaly in the vine crops. And so let's start with the vine crops. And just to be on the same page, I'm talking about cucumbers, melons, squash, and those type of crops. Just to begin with, in this type of vine crops, we have male flowers and female flowers. This is a monoecious crop, meaning both male and female are there, but they are on different branches. So first of all, you need to identify if that flower is a male or female. And just for example here, the male flowers in the top right just opens up with that beautiful petals and has its stamens at the center of the flower. But if you look at the female flower, there's a solemn structure on the base of the petals. Depending on what type of crop it is, it can be round or elongated like the one in the cucumber here. It looks like a baby cucumber. So the first thing is to identify if there is a male flower and female flower. what happens is early in the season, generally in the June time in Missouri, you can see a lot of blossoms, they drop. So flowers are dropping and kind of suddenly freak out, maybe what happens, what's going on my yard or garden, because you might get, shocked by seeing how many flowers drop, but it's very normal to drop those flowers. And the reason is those flowers we're seeing are actually male flowers. So if the female flowers drop, then that's a concern. But if the male's flower drop, then that's very normal. Because of the season, and also because you have plenty of male flowers in your vine crops, and the pollens that needs to get into the female flowers is not of concern. So know your flowers, and then don't get too much freaked out if you see a lot of flowers dropping in your vine crops. Another thing I want to point out is sometimes you get so excited that you got a lot of flowers in your vines, and then you think you're doing well, but be careful that those flowers could only be male flowers and no female flowers. And that could be because you have applied fertilizers that has too much nitrogen. So if you do not have a fertilizer which is balanced, like 13, 13, 13, that has enough phosphorus and potassium, then that extra nitrogen will push more male flowers than female flowers. As a result, your yield of the produce will decline. And also because of season, depending on the timing of the year, early in the season, in June time, you'll see more male flowers, but later in the season, once you start moving into the July time, you'll see more female flowers coming up. So keep those things in mind. But another question I want to address here is, okay, you figured out those male flowers, female flowers, you saw some fruit settings, but as soon as your fruits start to develop, you see those fruit decline, which we call premature fruit drop. And it can happen with a number of reasons. And the first one to point out is the pollination. And as you might know, female flowers needs to get pollens transferred from male flowers. And since for a lot of these vine crops, those flowers are at different branches, you need a pollinators to do that. Your bees, honeybees, mason bees, solitary bees, all those bees are your friends that will help you to transfer those pollens from male to female flowers. But many times what happens is just because of weather, is too much rain, too much dry weather, or you have very limited flowers in a garden, then your pollinators and bees are not visiting your garden, then chances are your flowers are not pollinated. So the result is either they do not develop fruits, or even if they develop fruits, they don't have good seed. So because of the lack of seed vigor, they will drop. And that's what we call premature fruit drop. And also because of using insecticides like pyrethroid-based insecticides or carbaryl, those insecticides used will, limit the activity of pollinators like bees. So you have to be very careful on those as well. And we recommend that you don't apply those insecticides early in the morning when bees are visiting your garden, and for that very reason. Another important reason why your fruits will drop might be what we call blossom end rot. And this is not a disease. This is actually a complex result from your calcium deficiency and other environmental factors like hot weather and your irrigation and soil moisture and all that. So when you get a blossom end rot, what you see is at the end of the fruit, like in this picture here, you will see this like a fungus growth rotting on the end of the fruit. And that's where we can point out this is more of a blossom end rot than of poor pollination. So it could be both or one of those factors. Again, blossom end rot, traditionally we thought it was just because of calcium deficiency, but that calcium deficiency can be triggered by, there could be calcium, or you could spray or use calcium in form of gypsum or other fertilizers, but your plant may not be able to uptake that calcium that in the soil because of irregular watering, hot weather, and all that has a factor to play in. So again, a lot of things can happen, but one way to manage this is your regular irrigation. If you can have consistent irrigation, either we are doing once a week, twice a week, that consistent irrigation will help to keep that calcium moving within the plants, and which will eventually, the plant can eventually correct that deficiency if you can be patient with your irrigations and all that. So that will be all from my side. If you have any questions, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj. And now Debbie is going to give us a horticulture term.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that the vast majority of you know what this is. If not, don't fret. It's xerophyte. So Jared, if you could pull the poll up for me, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Jared is our behind the scenes guy that helps us to make sure everything works well for us technologically. All right, answers are coming in. One of them is getting lots of votes. Give you another couple seconds here. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to I'll end the poll, share the results. So 60% of you say B, a plant that doesn't need a lot of water to survive. And then there was a tie between A and C, whether it needs a lot of water or if it doesn't necessarily need a lot of water or doesn't need less water. So the real answer here is it's going to be B, xerophyte, a plant that doesn't need a lot of water to survive. So I looked a list up of some of the different plants that we could actually put into our landscapes here in Missouri that I thought I would share with you and send you some pictures, show you pictures here so that you might be able to know. So actually a redbud tree, which kind of surprised me a little bit, but yet it shouldn't, just simply because it's a native tree, and a native tree, most of our native trees and native plants are probably going to grow really well, probably with less water than what we normally would think about as far as watering our fruits and vegetables and our flowers. A yucca plant, of course, is going to need and require less water. The mugo pine, it's a really, really low growing, short evergreen. When I ran across this, I was like, I really like this plant. So if you're looking for plants that you don't have to in a landscape setting, that's an excellent shrub to put into your landscape. So what are some, oops, sorry guys, I have all those extra words there that I forgot to delete. So creeping sedum, that's what this slide is all about. It's just the creeping sedum. And I wanted to show this to you just simply because there's so many different varieties out there with so many different varying coloration that you could add to your landscape and then not have to worry so much about watering them. And as our climate is starting to show a little bit of changes that are happening here, if you're starting to think of some plants, but you want to keep a colorful landscape, think of some of the different sedums that are out there. One of the things I do in my Master Gardener class, this is a sedum, but I didn't know it was a sedum until I started taking some horticulture classes in college. We actually called it a frog belly. Some people call it a stone crop, but we always called it a frog belly at my house. You take off one of those leaves, there's a thin layer along that leaf that's kind of a little waxy. And if you can stick your finger in there and kind of open up that waxy layer of the leaf and then blow into it, it sounds like a frog. So I thought that was interesting. And that's why we always have Latin botanical names so that we all know we're talking about the exact same plant. But in frog bellies, nobody ever, I always say, anybody know what a frog belly is? No one in class generally knows that answer. So it must have been a family name. Some of the different flowers that you might want to put out there, rose moss, I've grown that before. It's very, very nice. I like it. Lots of different colors. It's low growing. And ice plants, I've had those as well. They look really nice, especially in hanging baskets. If you have a lot of those you'd like to put out and you don't always think about watering them because they're up high and you may not see them in certain areas of your yard, an ice plant would be very good. cosmos, and they come in some nice shades of white and pinks and some other short variations. Silver mound, that's really nice to add to your landscape, especially if you've got lots of color. Looks really good with purples and with reds in a landscape. The calendula, and there's different varieties of the calendula that you can add, lots of different colorations that are out there that you can add. And then of course our lavender, they don't like to have wet feet, they like it more on a dry side. And Jennifer and Katie and Kelly's not on today, but they have had a small research grant looking at lavender and growing lavender as an alternative crop in the state of Missouri for cut flower industry and for the oils potentially. So that's another great crop plant to have in your landscape. So great, guys. Glad you understand all these terminologies. It's fun for me to do each time. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. And I'm going to end our topics by talking about white mushrooms that have popped up in containers and beds, particularly one from a client that I received yesterday. He wanted to know what the white mushrooms were that were coming up in his strawberry bed. And then there was a question on the Ask a Master Gardener Facebook page, and it showed white mushrooms growing in a pot of geraniums. So I'm going to answer this question and show you what these look like. All right, so, what are these? Why are they coming up in my beds? Are they harmful? This is the picture that the client sent yesterday of mushrooms growing up in his strawberry bed. This is the one from the Master Gardener Facebook page. These are the mushrooms coming up in her potted geranium. And it is a mushroom, and I am not going to attempt to pronounce that one, but they're there because the spores are present and conditions are favorable. So most likely she's watering that geranium regularly. The strawberry bed may be getting watered regularly. And I know Putnam County's had some rain coming through. Even this morning, Putnam County's getting rain where that bed is at. So when you have moisture, you have the right temperature, usually in the 70s, low or high 60s, low 70s, mid 70s, and then possibly shade, like growing under the leaves of a plant, then those are the conditions that are favorable for those mushrooms to grow. Now, will they hurt the plants? And the answer is no. Those type of mushrooms are not going to hurt your plants. And all you need to do is just pull them out and throw them away. And if you had a lot and you just left them, it's not going to hurt your plants. So nothing to worry about. And that's all I have for that topic. Okay, and so that concludes our presentations today. And I will turn it back over to Donna to wrap it up.
Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer. So if you ever want to go back and listen or view some of these episodes that we have, these programs, you can go to the YouTube website, and in the search bar, you would type in MUIPM, just like what's over here, and it will actually pop up our channel. And you can actually subscribe to it by clicking on the red button that says subscribe. And you can go and watch any snippets, you can watch live streams, you can the previous episodes. So it's really, this website, I love it because, if you have friends or family that want to know like what's wrong with your tomato, or, any number of, topics, they're all there. Nice little snippets, about 3 to 7 minutes in length, and you can view them at your leisure. And so that makes it really nice. There we go. It's going now. And then of course, don't forget, we are weekly. And you can tune in every Wednesday at noon. The next one will be July 19th. If you want to ask a question, actually, you will have to go back and re-register and ask the question at that point. And you can also include pictures. If you would like to save the chat from today, you can go over, open up the chat box over to the right. At the bottom, you will see 3 dots. You would click on those dots and you just hit save chat. And when it saves that chat, it will save all those links that were put in. So anytime you can go back and click on those links and see what those web pages are. And of course, reach out to any of us at any time that you have questions or concerns, or if you have any great ideas for topics, you can always reach out to us, as well as sending them in on the registration page. And so that is all we have for you today. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your week.